Good evening. Welcome to a regularly scheduled meeting of the Waterville City Council. If anybody would like an agenda, I believe they are right on the bench outside. And we have Adam Cullen, Waterville 8th grader here tonight. He comes to every meeting. His parents couldn't give him a ride tonight, so he's hitching a ride with me home, and we're going to ask him to stand and lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Next up is the disclosure of conflict of interest. Are there any counselors who have a conflict of interest with any votes they'll take tonight? Seeing that there are none, we'll move on to the approval of the consent agenda. Could I get a motion for the approval of the consent agenda?
So moved.
And second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Unfinished business, ordinance 77, 2019.
Move to adopt.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
An ordinance providing for adoption of food sovereignty ordinance.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Okay, Counselor.
So I had some constituents who reached out and
Get your mic right up there.
I had some constituents who reached out and they had some concern about the ordinance. They were hoping that we can get a couple of questions answered for them. So one of the questions was, will the food producers, they will be held to a certain food safety standard, the food producers? Is there something in writing that would, that outline the standards that they will be held to?
No. That's the whole point of it.
Counselor, could you have your mic as well so that everyone can hear your answers?
So, because one of the concern was there's no regulation that will basically account for keeping constituents, safe in terms of the food that they will be consuming when they receive it from somebody who doesn't, somebody who produces food that is not regulated.
I'm not sure the question. If you didn't buy the food, you wouldn't have it. Unless you go to that person's home to buy said dish, you wouldn't be having that dish. That is a transaction between two consenting adults.
Absolutely. And the question is, when the person goes to the producer who's producing the food, what kind of standard, guidelines, safety, standards are put in place so that the person purchasing the food, knows that there's some quality checks that are being put in place, some safety standards, so that they can feel confident that the item that they're purchasing, would meet health requirement for them.
I guess that would be a conversation between that consumer and that producer. If you go to a person's home and it's trashed, you are less likely to buy something from that person. If you go to a home that looks immaculate, you're less worried about that. I mean, if I come to your house for dinner, what are the safety standards?
I don't make food to sell to people.
And most people who are food sovereign aren't really doing it to supply to the masses. If they want to can some relish and sell it to people, they can. If they want to put some vegetables at the end of their driveway, they can. That is between two adults. We're not saying that you can produce this food in your home and then take it to a farmer's market, but if you want to sell said cake to your neighbor, then so be it.
Okay. So, because again, the concern of the consumer was just no safety standard to allow to make sure that it can quell the concern of people purchasing the food so that they can feel comfortable, like if they go to Hannaford or Walmart, they know that the food that they buy there has been checked by the state or whichever organization. So.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the food that you would buy at a grocery store would fall under regulation. I mean, because they have to adhere to legal standards as a business,
Right.
because they are licensed through the state. This is more direct, farm to the consumer.
Absolutely, I understand that
Is
portion.
my understanding.
Yeah. And also, there was the second question was about if there's is there a procedure to shut down a producer who has been found to have unsafe items that they are selling to people? So if I'm a producer and I'm selling my food product, and it turns out that some of the items that I've been selling to constituents have not been the most safe item to consume, is there something in a code that will dictate how the city will deal with that?
The city's not really involved. It's a transaction between two adults. What would happen if you sell food to somebody and it's tainted food, most likely you're going to get sued. I mean, that is what stops you.
So there's nothing that will, from the city standpoint, because the state,
I mean,
because my underst-
This essentially removes the city from the transaction. Yeah.
And says the two adults who want to have a transaction together, everyone else is not involved.
Okay.
But to be clear, this is direct sales to consumers. It does not change what can be sold in commercial establishments like grocery stores.
Correct. And somebody producing in their home cannot take that product to, say, a farmer's market to sell. That requires regulation. This is me and you, period. Nobody else. As long as we're adults and you want to pay me $10 to bake you a cake, then I should be able to bake you a cake. If some little lady wants to make cookies for a bake sale and she wants to sell them out, she should be able to without fear that she's going to get in trouble for it, period. The government should not be involved in a transaction that is simple, one-to-one person. Now, if they were trying to set up a breakfast place in their home in the morning, that would be an issue. Now you're crossing over to what a restaurant does, and you should be inspected. But other than that, no.
Okay. All right. So the final question that was raised by the constituent was where the code, the ordinance provides for the code enforcement officer to have the ability to enforce on meat and poultry products. There is nothing in the ordinance that allows him to be able to have the same enforcement power for the other products. Is there?
Do you want to treat meat differently than you treat vegetables?
Oh, I'm just asking questions from constituents. It's
I know
not my
it's not you.
questions. Yes, it's not.
I get
It's a question from constituents that were raised.
So in the ordinance, there is a state provision for inspecting meat. As long as all of those statutes have been met for the state level, then what is there left for our code enforcement person to do? I mean, the code enforcement's not just going to walk into your home unless they suspect something's going on. And if we see 30 vehicles on every day coming in and out of your driveway, you're running a business. You're not doing a direct to transaction. You're running a business out of your house. You should absolutely be licensed. But if we're doing transactions one to the other, I don't see an issue. We're not producing for mass. Nobody's delivering this stuff.
It's like if my neighbor who has chickens wants to sell me a dozen eggs on a regular basis. I think.
You should be allowed to buy those eggs.
They're fair questions.
Absolutely fair questions.
Okay. Is there anybody else in the council has a statement or question? Anybody from the public? Could you just come up to the podium and just let us know your name and your question, sir? Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name's Robert Krickus. I'm a resident in Ward 2. Just have a brief statement I'd like to read. I'm also here with my sons. And I'd like to speak on behalf of my wife, Jennifer, who could not attend today. She's out of town working as with a food producer in Washington County. She's a veterinarian, has a master's in public health, and works as a food safety expert. My wife has several concerns about the proposed food sovereignty ordinance that she believes should be at least discussed and understood by the council before you decide to vote on this ordinance. Our biggest concern is whether Waterville is prepared to face the moral consequences of somebody coming ill from eating food produced from an unlicensed producer. If this ordinance passes, producers selling from their kitchens or homes will no longer have even the minimal oversight of an annual inspection of their kitchens or farm by the state. An inspector whose sole purpose is to make sure that the food produced on the premises is healthy and safe to eat. Are we prepared as a city to allow producers to sell food that is potentially unsafe in the name of deregulation for deregulation's sake? We are morally prepared for children to become ill or worse because we want to allow producers to avoid a $50 fee and a basic inspection for sanitary practices. Are we prepared financially as a city to settle wrongful death suit brought against us for allowing the producer to sell unsafe food without the benefit of inspection or regulation? Passage of this food sovereignty ordinance would leave Waterville with two poor options. The first would be to allow unlicensed producers to operate with no rules at all and risk the worst case scenario of someone becoming ill or dying. The second option would be to go to the expense and trouble of developing our own city rules to ensure that food produced in these kitchens and farms are safe. Why would creation of rules be necessary? Because while provision has been made in the ordinance for enforcement of the ordinance by a code enforcement officer, at present we have no city regulations for food safety that officer could enforce. Does anyone working for the city know the amount of time that food can remain in the danger zone between cooking and cooling to prevent Clostridium overgrowth? Do any of you know what water temperature is necessary to sanitize a food contact surface? Does anyone know how to avoid listeria contamination in ready-to-eat meals? The state inspection programs not only know these answers to these questions and spend many hours with producers educating them on sanitary practices, but they also have the regulations in place to bring enforcement actions against producers who cannot or will not hold up to the sanitary standards needed to produce food safely. Both my wife and I support our local farmers by purchasing locally made foods. We support any effort that will increase food security and build up our local food community. In this case, we believe that the best course of action would be to protect the integrity and reputation of locally made food produced in Waterville by refusing to enact food sovereignty ordinance. And does anybody have any questions?
Anybody?
All right, thank you very much.
We don't, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Is there anybody else from the public that has a question?
Hi, my name is Heather Merrill. I didn't come here about the food sovereignty, but I just want to tell you, for 4 years, I had chickens. I gave away my eggs. My people knew that I gave them to, that they weren't pasteurized, that they were fresh farm eggs. I never had any issue. People should be able to give food away. People should be able to sell it. No wonder we have food insecurities with all the bills and all the taxes and all of this. If my neighbor brings me a cake, am I going to say, "Oh, did you sanitize your counter?" Well, no, I'm not. I'm going to eat the cake and say thank you. So I just want to tell you that.
Anybody else?
Can I follow up?
Certainly.
Okay. Just so everybody knows that if my dentist brings us a cake every month, I mean, the thing is, we're not going after people who give their neighbors eggs or bake a cake for their neighbor. But food sovereignty, where's the cap? Where is the place that becomes popular and starts selling food to hundreds or thousands of people? It's just kind of free-for-all. We don't want to return to the time where I'm sorry, I believe food sovereignty people really have good intentions and really want to help support local food. But there's nothing that in the current system that prevents that from happening. And we're just willing to go back to, create the jungle and just let anything happen without any recourse. And that's what enacting food sovereignty allows. And I think there needs to be much more discussion about it before we dive into this blindly. Thank you.
Sure.
Mike, well, when we research, I think there's something like 50 other municipalities that have food sovereignty already enacted. Do we have any cases of anyone dying from eating tainted food?
Not yet.
How many cases do we have of food poisoning from, just regular restaurants?
A lot.
And they get inspected every day.
That's the point.
All right, sir, I'm going to, just for the order of the meeting, I'm going to ask you to now withhold your comment.
Sorry.
That's all right. Thank you. No problem. I appreciate that you're here and your boys are wonderful. So, yeah. Counselor.
But the only other concern that I could pick up from the statement is, we don't want to restrict people who do transaction with their neighbors and all that. And when does it become something that we have to look into? Is there something that will dictate to us, okay, it used to be just a neighbor, now it's the whole neighborhood? And now you're not just exchanging eggs with your neighbor, you are selling eggs to the entire neighborhood, and it becomes more of a business. Should it be regulated then, or should we just allow everybody to just basically be able to do that? And what will stop, a larger chain, and not a chain, but a larger, entity to say, hey, maybe I want to be part of this food sovereignty thing and just sell my food this way instead of having it being checked by the state, because, well, if they can do it, they can sell it to the neighbor. I'm in this neighborhood, they're all my neighbors. I want to be able to sell to them without having to be inspected.
I think we're using neighbor too literal. We would be allowed, Fairfield, for instance, right next door, they are food sovereign. We would be able to, you can go to Fairfield and buy something from one of the people that live there. If you want eggs, lettuce, cucumbers, whatever it is that you want to buy. There should be no cap on that. If it's between you and me. If people are getting sick, we would look into that. We know that there are some close to 50 municipalities that have allowed this. The state has allowed us to loosen these restrictions. I think that for us, maybe for me, I believe that when our government gets too involved in our lives, it's a recipe for disaster. There is a place for inspection, but 100 people aren't coming to buy a cake from you. And if they do, your neighbor's going to call and complain. And then the city's going to go down and look and see what's going on. That's on them. That's between you and those people, period.
You could have really good cakes and they.
I hope they do.
Now I want cake.
Okay.
I want some.
All right. Is there any other new questions or comments? Yes, Counselor.
I would like to echo something that Heather said, which was brought to my attention by some of my constituents, that this is about selling, but it's also about recovering food that is perfectly safe for consumption, but is now being required to be thrown away. And because of the issues we have with food insecurity, this is food that, if we had this ordinance in place, could be recovered and donated. And I think that's an important element to consider here as well.
Anybody else? Okay, I will ask for a roll call.
Counselor Morris?
Yes.
Counselor Bofia?
No.
Counselor Smith? Yes. Counselor Mayu?
Yes.
Counselor Coelho?
Yes.
Counselor Tate?
Yes.
Counselor Thomas?
Yes.
Vote is 6 in favor, one opposed.
Okay. We are now going on to Order 78, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
In order providing for acceptance of a proposal for LED streetlight conversion.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I just want to be clear that by approving this, the council is also basically agreeing to borrow the money to do this. So we haven't approved a bond yet for this, but that's sort of one follows the other. We can't do this without borrowing the money, even though this will pay for itself in about 2.5 years. We are essentially committing ourselves to borrow the money to do this.
We are, but if the council voted down the bond, it would never happen. Because it ties it to the bond, there could be an option to kill it at a later time. Not that I'm recommending that. I don't.
Right.
Or anything.
We could also do the lease purchase from the company that's providing the streetlights, so that would be another option.
Okay.
Question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we know how much money we'll be saving by making the switch?
We're not going to save enough soon enough to pay the upfront costs. It's going to take, as Eric said, 2.5, 3 years.
But it's a savings of about $250,000 a year. Was that it, Mark?
On our electric bill.
Over on our current electric bill, $250,000 a year.
We can do those too. Any other questions or comments from the council? Mark, did you want to chime in? I see you. I can't tell. No? Any questions or comments from the public? All right. Could I take a roll call vote, please?
Councilor Morris?
Yes.
Councilor Bropia?
Yes.
Councilor Smith? Yes. Councilor Mayu?
Yes.
Councilor Colello?
Yes.
Councilor Tate?
Yes.
Councilor Thomas?
Yes.
Vote is 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Next is Order 79, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
And second.
All in favor?
In order providing for approval of forfeiture.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Is there discussion? Could I take a roll call vote?
Councilor Morris?
Yes.
Councilor Bropia?
Yes.
Councilor Smith? Yes. Councilor Mayu?
Yes.
Councilor Colello?
Yes.
Councilor Tate?
Yes.
Councilor Thomas?
Yes.
Vote is 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Next, Order 80, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
And second.
All in favor?
In order providing for approval of forfeiture.
Move to adopt.
And second.
Any discussion? Could I get a roll call, please?
Councilor Morris?
Yes.
Councilor Bropia?
Yes.
Councilor Smith? Yes. Councilor Mayu?
Yes.
Councilor Colello?
Yes.
Councilor Tate?
Yes.
Councilor Thomas?
Yes.
Vote is 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Next is Order 81, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
And second.
All in favor?
In order providing for approval of forfeiture.
Move to adopt.
And second.
Is there any discussion? I'll take a roll call, please.
Councilor Morris?
Yes.
Councilor Bropia?
Yes.
Councilor Smith? Yes. Councilor Mayu?
Yes.
Councilor Colello?
Yes.
Councilor Tate?
Yes.
Councilor Thomas?
Yes.
Vote is 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Michael?
Yes. Unfortunately, 2 items were left off the unfinished business list. Both the solar orders that were on last meeting and got the first vote, but now we need to take a second vote. So Sarah has put both of those orders in front of you, 65 and 66.
I'd make a motion to waive cloture to add order number 65-2019 and order number 66-2019 to the agenda.
Actually, Bill Lee advised
He
us,
said we don't have to.
right, because it was a clerical error in leaving them off.
Okay.
And because they were already unfinished business from the
Yeah,
last
they're
one?
already unfinished business.
You have a question, Counselor?
Yeah, that, I just feel like, this is an item that should be tabled, and we should give the opportunity to constituents who had concerns and who had questions about this item to be able to come in and voice their concern, because when the agenda is put out, I understand it might be a clerical error. If that's the case, we should table to allow not only, possibly councilors who might have some questions, or also constituents who would have questions about an item to have the chance to be able to come in, and we should not get in the habit of, sliding things in before the meeting and say, well, we forgot to put it in, and therefore, people who are not here don't get the chance to be able to come in and ask the questions about an item.
Is that a form, are you making a motion to?
I'm making a motion to table.
Okay, is there a second on that motion? Okay, we will move on to Order 65, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
And second.
All in favor?
Move.
An approval providing for approval of a lease for solar energy facility on city property, Runzer.
Move to adopt.
And second.
And is there any discussion from the council? Councilor Mayhew.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate the purpose of this project with this solar investor. Talking to Garvin Donegan with the Central Maine Growth Council and the Mid-Maine Chamber of Commerce. These are deals with this solar investor that have been going on for a long time. I can't say enough of how important it is and how intuitive for the municipality that we are is to endorse projects and investment in the city. This is a project that is going on land that is really uninhabitable and inhospitable to anything else. The revenue that the city can reap from this is very significant. The time and energy and process of what we do as a city to open our doors to business, being friendly business, is something that we all have to endorse. And I very much feel that this investment is going to benefit us down the road. We can have other talks and other discussions about some of the things that Council Beaufier has said, and I think that should be an open dialogue, and we should look into that as well. But as the present deal that has been put forward to us now, I think it's critical from every serious standpoint, from an economic development standpoint, to go ahead and do this. Thank you.
Councilor.
Thank you. Again, I will reiterate the concern that I had the previous meeting, and should I have known that this was being on the agenda, I would have came in with more facts and figures to be able to share with people. This deal is a good deal. I just don't believe it's the best deal we could get. Okay, I don't believe it's the best deal because looking at other municipalities and things that were done with their town and what they were able to negotiate, they got better deals, and we should be able to do that. There's no reason why we could not renegotiate a deal when the state of Maine does the same. It did that with CMP, with the corridor. You know, the previous administration had a deal. The new administration came in, renegotiated the deal, and got a better deal out of it. It just takes, you know, willing people to, you know, to take a stand for their community and for their constituents and try to get the best they could possibly get. And I think that this deal, whether it is a good deal, but I believe we could have got a better deal. We could have got ourselves, you know, electricity for our schools. Last year, the school system used 720 kilowatt, spending over $200,000 in electricity. You know, renegotiating a deal that will cut that electricity cost significantly is something that would benefit everybody for a number of years. It would benefit the city, the taxpayers, reduce the tax burden on the constituents. And I really think that, you know, providing our land to investors for energy to be produced here and not having that energy serve us. I mean, we see the uproar with the CMP corridor, with energy that's being produced in our state, and that energy being sold out of our state. And that same thing is happening here, and we don't want to take a second look at this. And I really believe that we should. And I really think that, you know, we have an opportunity here to do something that will benefit the city for at least 40 years. Getting a solar facility for the city because we negotiated a deal that gave us that kind of generation is something that will benefit everybody. It will benefit our city, our constituents, and it would be, and I really, really think we should take a serious second look at these deals and how we approach, because other people have done it, and their city and our state is better for it.
Councilor Thomas.
I want to be a little careful here, but frankly, it's a little irresponsible to throw around the language that Councilor Bofier is throwing around about the kind of deals that we can get when he doesn't have an actual proposal.
I do.
Also, the deals that he's referencing in other towns are completely different than what we're talking about here. I believe he's referring to what a lot of towns have done with a company called Revision Energy, where that was exactly what they did, is they brought them in to build a facility to produce them power. That's not what this project is. This project is something completely different. If we want to look at the type of things that other towns have done, we certainly can look at that. And what I would recommend if Councilor Bofier wants to look into that is that he form a committee to look into doing that. But that is not what this deal is about. This is about a company building a large solar farm to produce energy to go into the grid. That's not, it's completely different from what he's referencing in other towns. And in terms of the CMP corridor, you know, this is a company that can take this project elsewhere if we want to just put roadblocks in front of them. It's not the same as what the deal with CMP is. They don't have a lot of other options. This company does. And, you know, we're talking about land that is costing the city money at this point, and this is a chance to put something up there that will generate income. Mike, did you come up with an estimate, a loose estimate of what the tax dollars will be from the project up there? I mean, we're talking about millions of dollars of investment.
Oh, yes. In terms of investment, yes. In terms of revenue to the city, I don't have those numbers with me. But it's the per acre rent plus, of course, the property taxes on the panels themselves.
And I mean, we're likely talking hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I believe it actually was about $1 million over a 20-year period.
Right. I want to let the council know that Bob Patton from HEP Energy is here tonight, so if you have questions of him also, he's available to answer questions.
As point order, I will. Councilor Thomas said he wanted to be careful about, his comment that he made. I will caution not to point out that I don't have a plan, because Councilor Thomas does not know. He doesn't know if I have a plan or not. Matter of fact, I do. And if I would have known that this item would have been on the agenda, I would have brought it up. I would have brought it to propose. So do you? Pointing and saying that I don't have a plan, is something that, I would say is not cautious, and I would say is not, it's not correct. Okay, thanks.
I would point out, my commentary on this is that, as somebody who's been working on this for the last 3 years, is that we entered into these wonderful negotiations with good partners on good faith. And this was a unique project because we've always tried to figure out what we could do with the landfill, because the landfill does cost us money. And we came up with this great deal that actually is extremely unique, and there are municipalities around the country that will be watching what we do here. And based on the negotiations and partnerships that we've had, tens of thousands of dollars have already been spent. There's been probably thousands of hours from both our partners, from the state, from Garvin, from the city, that have poured into this to get us to this point. The reality is, this particular type of project, and I want to be clear, the city cannot take power from this. That is a completely different kind of project, which, by the way, our partners are extremely excited to talk to us about if that's something we're interested in. Perhaps we can leverage some of the new cash payments that we'll be getting from this project to do just what Councilor Bofier has suggested. So I think that there's a lot of merit to his ideas of trying to lower the city's energy costs, and I commend him for raising those points. But I would, on this particular project, encourage the council to please pass both these next two orders to get us moving and get this project online.
I would like to add that when we, as a city, authorize people to negotiate on our behalf, as the committee has done with this company. I think it's important that they know that they have the confidence of the city. I have been incredibly impressed in my conversations with Garvin and the role that the Central Maine Growth Council has played in spearheading and really pioneering all of the investment in our city, and I have total confidence in his ability to negotiate the best deal for the city alongside the very able representatives of the council. And so I just want to express that they do have my full support, and I do believe that they have negotiated the best deal for the city, and I very much appreciate the work that they have put into this.
Is there any other questions or comments from the council? Questions or comments from the public? Please come to the podium, sir.
Hi, Dan Libby, Ward 4. Who prepares the agenda?
That would be our city clerk, Patty.
She's not here tonight. All right, and you did not come prepared with numbers to discuss this matter? Mr. Roy?
I'm sorry.
Well,
say
you
it
were
again.
asked earlier for some financials on this particular matter, and you said you did not come prepared with those numbers. Is that correct?
I was asked what the revenues, expected revenues might be, and I don't have that with me.
And you couldn't speak to it. All right, thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments from the public? I will go for, ask for a roll call vote on Order 65, 2019.
Counselor Morris?
Yes.
Counselor Bofia?
No.
Counselor Smith?
Yes.
Counselor Mayu?
Yes.
Counselor Coelho?
Yes.
Counselor Tate?
Yes.
Counselor Thomas?
Yes.
Vote is 6 in favor, 1 opposed.
Order 66, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
In order providing for approval of a lease for solar energy facility on city property landfill.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Is there discussion on the second lot? Anything new? From the public? I'll take a roll call vote, please.
Counselor Morris?
Yes.
Counselor Bofia?
No.
Counselor Smith?
Yes.
Counselor Mayu?
Yes.
Counselor Coelho?
Yes.
Counselor Tate?
Yes.
Counselor Thomas?
Yes.
Vote is 6 in favor, 1 opposed.
Moving on to Order 84, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
And second.
All in favor?
In order providing for a sale of city property, 15 South Grove Street.
Can I get a motion to adopt?
Move to adopt.
And second.
And is there discussion? Okay. We'll take a vote. All in favor? Or did somebody want to slow this down?
This is Order 84-2019, correct?
84, 2019.
Right. This is the one. This is it.
Yeah.
It's a first of
This is the
two
one.
First
required
reading.
votes.
Right. I believe that the council wants to table this item so that we can possibly make amendments to the ordinance.
It's possible you could take the first vote and then see an ordinance amendment prior to taking a second one.
Do we want to take first vote?
I would say, I think we can do that, right? And then amend it, and then once the amendment is passed, the ordinance, we can take the second vote?
Yeah.
They move it along a little?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so is everybody ready for a first vote? Is that, look,
But what are we voting for?
We're voting on.
You're voting on the order?
The order as written.
Okay.
To get it going, because then it won't be pushed back, right?
All right, you guys have to speak loud. This is a public meeting. There's no whispering.
There's been a motion and a second. Is there any
Is there
discussion?
any discussion? All in favor?
Thank you. We'll get working on the amendment.
Okay.
Next is Resolution 85, 2019.
Move to adopt.
She's got to read it first.
I gotta read it.
Read by title only.
A resolution providing for notice of sale of tax-acquired property. Be it resolved by the Waterville City Council, acting as municipal officers, that the city manager be authorized to advertise for sale a residential property at 70 Violet Ave, with the understanding that the final sale is subject to approval by the city council.
Move to adopt.
And second.
Is there discussion? Counselor.
This particular property is located in my ward and was subject to a lot of past history that wasn't so pleasant. I think I can speak on behalf of the Violet Street residents as to what this house is all about. I had the pleasure of going in with Linda, it was from the city, to tour this building just a few days ago. And this is definitely a fixer-upper. But it's definitely very viable housing, something that can be put back on the tax rolls for the city. I see this as a win-win situation all the way around, so I encourage us to move ahead with this for this particular property after looking at it with Linda.
Having spoken to the neighbors, I will say ditto on that. Any other discussion or questions from the council? From the public? Okay, all in favor? Next, Resolution 86, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for issuance of a vitulers license to Main Street 108 LLC.
Move to adopt.
And second.
Is there discussion?
What is this?
It's a burrito restaurant from Kevin Joseph. Is he here?
Kevin, you want to tell us about
It's
it?
here.
Come on, this is exciting.
Burritos, always excited.
Seriously, no, but like legit, they are.
No, it's just, yeah, it's going to be across the street from Jorgensen's Cafe. That's the chocolate, that used to be Kennebec chocolate.
Yep.
It's going to be focused mostly on burritos. And they're
Awesome.
going to gradually probably expand it depending on what the clientele want to have. So it's going to be pretty basic, if you will. But yeah, that's it. A burrito shop.
Got your burritos here. Do you have a time frame for when you'll be open, Kevin?
We're looking towards the end of June, early July.
Wow, coming right up.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So hopefully you guys will all agree that it's a good idea.
Absolutely.
Something else on Main Street, another business, which I think is good for everybody.
Yes.
Are there people that don't like burritos?
Any vegan options?
For you, yes. I feel like I'm a politician.
Oh, man.
But there will be.
Oh, good.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Gluten-free, we'll be doing all that stuff.
Oh, good.
Cool. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, we'll take a vote. All in favor? Kevin, you didn't see it, but it was unanimous. Next is Ordinance 87, 2019.
An ordinance providing for amendment to the licenses and permits ordinance, be it enacted by the Waterville City Council, acting as the municipal officers as follows. That the licenses and permits ordinance be amended to include a reference to the seasonal concession policy as shown on the attached.
Move to adopt.
And second.
And Mike, can you give us a history of where this is coming from?
This is all about the mobile food vendor, you know, that I think we expect to see more and more of in the city, at Hedda Falls, also on North Street, possibly near the pool. So we needed to amend our ordinance to just make that more possible for people to do that, and also put some guidelines in place so that if we do allow them to do it, they're going to follow certain rules and regs regarding the mobile food vendors.
Oops. Thanks. And does this still keep the requirements away from permanent food vendors?
They'll still keep the permits.
Because it used to be if you want a food truck, there
You
has
can't
to
be so close to.
so close to an established.
Right, so for instance, the one on North Street would not be able to sell ice cream because of its proximity to the North Street
Yes.
Dairy Cone, is that what
Yeah.
it's called?
Correct.
Anyway, you know what I mean.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, that separation still applies.
Okay.
That's the same here on Main Street, so if somebody want, well, I don't think anybody sells falafels, so if somebody wanted to sell falafels, would we stop?
It
them
would
from
still
doing so?
apply. Actually, there, I think the ordinance prohibits food, Sarah knows, probably knows better than I do, prohibits them in the Main
In
Street
the,
area.
yeah, the downtown area is restricted.
Okay.
Just the question is about the amount. How did we come up with how much money we're going to charge for those permits?
Yes, there it is.
Yeah, how did we arrive to that conclusion that we would charge $1,500 for full season and $1,000 for half a season?
Yep.
What was the parameter to that amount? Did we
I
Looked at other towns.
I think
Had similar.
Patty and Matt Scan, our Parks and Rec director, looked at fees for
Okay.
other towns,
Yeah,
and that's how they came up with
Okay.
those recommended amounts.
and that's pretty consistent with other towns and,
Yeah, I believe it is.
okay.
All right, is there any other discussion from the council? From the public? All in favor? Moving on to Resolution 88, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for amendments to seasonal concession policy.
Move to adopt. It was, there needed to be a space there, Sarah.
So this is a policy that's already in place, and as you can see, we'd be amending two sections, Section 19 and Section 24.
Is there any discussion or questions from the council?
So, does this have to do with, because, is that what this is? Okay. So when it says here that only one mobile food vendor may operate from May 1st to 7th, what if two vendors wanted to operate from May 1st to 7th? Or three of them?
They can't.
So,
So is this just a first come, first served basis?
is that what it is?
Yes,
Yeah.
first come, first served basis. I think that this policy is going to end up evolving over time, so we're going to make changes over time when we find what works and what doesn't, because the mobile food vendors are pretty much a new game in town. We certainly don't want to do anything to discourage them. I think Matt and Patty felt it was important to place some kind of limits initially, but this is something that council can change at any meeting.
Yeah, and that's where I was going, because we kind of limiting, choices for our constituents, and also we kind of limiting ourselves in the amount of money that we can make by allowing just one food truck to be able to operate at any given time, right? And I mean, I understand that there has to be some restriction. I was just looking at where it is becoming such a popular, practice. Why not try to maximize and get as much money as we can within, reason, to say.
Yeah, I know what you mean, because I went to the Bangor waterfront last fall, and last summer, and I had my choice of 5 or 6 different food trucks all lined up. Do you want burritos? Or,
Yes, or falafel.
Well, right.
Mike, did we look at other places that have more established food truck services and look at what their ordinances are to see what's been successful, or is this kind of, we've made this up without doing that?
No, I think Patty and Matt did do some research in terms of fees, but I don't know the extent. I'm sorry?
Bangor. They use this off of, like Bangor and one other town has concessions, so they kind of use,
I mean, Portland has a pretty extensive
was
food truck
I don't know.
community.
Were you privy to any of their conversations about
definitely don't wanna be
limiting to certain numbers or certain places?
I think they just wanted to start off with these numbers to see if there was an interest in that before they opened it up to a lot more.
I just want to be clear, Mike. So are these the only places? Because there are, I mean, there's a mobile food truck that comes at Waterville Brewing. There's There's a mobile food vendor in the old George's restaurant parking lot,
So
right?
these are two different things. This is a concession,
Concession.
which is like from May to whenever, October, November, or September.
Sunday in September.
Yeah. So, and they're just certain locations, Hedda Falls and North Street. The mobile food vendor is something completely different. You have to get permission from the landowner, and it's only, either 7 days to 90 days, and you have to renew.
So the difference is that these people are operating on public property.
Right,
Right.
right, exactly.
And they're going through Parks and Rec. The mobile food goes through the city clerk.
So somebody parks in the Hathaway parking lot, private property, all they need is that permit from Patty's office.
And permission from the property.
Correct.
Yeah.
Any other discussion on this? All in favor? Moving on to Resolution 89, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for issuance of a pole permit to Central Maine Power on County Road.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Is there discussion?
I just,
What are the polls for?
Well, they have to receive the city's permission to put a pole in our right-of-way.
Okay.
So it's our land, and for them to be able to put that telephone pole in the ground, they need our permission.
It's a telephone pole?
Utility pole.
Yeah. Okay. And do they pay us? I know
No.
they probably pay for it. They don't pay for it?
No,
No?
Is that standard?
Why not?
standard, yeah.
Because it would get, is this a pole replacement, or is this because there's new development and people need new poles?
Yeah, I've never been faced with that question about payment. I don't know if the Public Utilities Commission, requires municipalities to issue permits, but may not allow the charging of fees. I don't know that. I'm
Okay.
just thinking
Yeah, I'm just-
PUC may have a hand in that.
Because I'm just thinking, we pay them for the electricity that they're providing us for these poles.
You'll be
So-
paying more if you
Is that what-
charge them for the pole.
Maybe. Maybe we get a discount based on the number of poles that they have in our city.
All right.
the only question I have is, this paperwork says pole 502 County Road, Oakland. Is it on Oak, is it in Oakland or is it in Waterville?
No, CMP has its own names for roads, that they don't, they
Done deal?
stick with those names. But County Road is in both Waterville and Oakland.
Right.
That's why I was just making sure that it was going on our side.
If you're in Oakland, you're taking the back road to Fairfield, it's the,
Yeah, it's Waterville.
it's the
It says
Fairfield Center Road. If you're in Fairfield going to Oakland, it's the Oakland.
Done deal.
Is there any other questions or comments? All in favor? That was unanimous. Next is Resolution 90, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for issuance of a vitulers license to Charter Foods North LLC, doing business as Taco Bell.
Move to adopt.
And second.
So I assume this is the Taco Bell that was built up by Thompson Volkswagen that opened and closed. We have new owners, is that?
Correct.
Are they here tonight? Hi. First of all, thank you for being here, and thank you for wanting to open this restaurant.
Wtvl Cardenas, I'm the district manager for Charter Foods North. We're currently trying to open all the locations that closed down to provide jobs for all the citizens that lost their jobs when they closed down. So we're hoping to do Waterville next.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate that. Yeah. All right, any questions or comments from the council? Or from the public? All in favor? Thank you, sir. Next is Resolution 91, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for approval of an agreement for 911 calls.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Is there discussion? Yes.
Green Finch, Ward 6. I have a question, and I only read this in the paper, so I don't really understand it very well. But Waterville doesn't take 911 calls. They go to Somerset. Why isn't Waterville able to take 911 calls?
The state of Maine decided quite a while ago to set up these PSAPs, Public Safety Answering Points, and there are 22 of them in the state. And so by law, all 911 calls have to go to a PSAP. We go to the Skowhegan PSAP. A lot of it is because of calls now from mobile phones. So we're not all of the dispatch centers are able to receive 911 calls from mobile phones.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Is there any other questions or comments? All in favor?
You.
Moving on to Resolution 92, 2019.
A resolution providing for adoption of a fee increase for purple trash bags. Be it resolved by the Waterville City Council, acting as the municipal officers, that the current cost of both small and large purple trash bags be increased by $1 per container by the beginning of July 1st, 2019. This charge will increase the cost of small bags by 12 cents and large bags by 20 cents for the first year. Be it further resolved that a $1 increase be applied for each of the next 4 years with the intent of making trash disposal self-supporting.
Move to adopt.
And second.
And I will open it for discussion from the council.
I guess I'll start. I think this is really, it's a few things. One, it's financial management for the city, but it's also an issue of fairness. As the only person on the only elected official, I think, who was involved in this the last time, there are a lot of taxpayers in the city who do not get municipal solid waste pickup. If you're a commercial taxpayer, you are on your own for trash pickup. If you are a landlord of a building with, 5 units or more? 5 units or more, you do not get, it's more than 4 units or 5 units or more. Same thing. You do not get trash pickup. So you have certain taxpayers who are subsidizing the service for other taxpayers. You also, of course, we've had a lot of people, since we implemented pay-as-you-throw, who have opted to go to a private service. And the program doesn't currently pay for itself just from the fees collected by trash bags. It's still subsidized to the tune of about $175,000 a year by taxpayers. So you could be somebody who decided to go to one of the private haulers, and you are still subsidizing your neighbor's trash removal with your tax dollars. And I really think that this should be looked at more like all of your, your electric bill, your oil bill. You wouldn't expect your neighbor to subsidize your electric bill with their tax dollars, so they shouldn't be subsidizing your trash removal. The other thing is the trash business is very uncertain right now. We don't know where things are going to be 4 or 5 years from now. I think there's a good chance the city is going to want to be out of the trash business at some point, and I think this is a way to move us in that direction. Everyone will have the option. You are not required to use the city service, so if you don't like the trash bags, if you think it's too much to pay for trash removal, you have the option to go to a private hauler and see if you can get a better deal or better service for the same amount of money. But again, I just think it's in the interest of fairness. This is what we should do. I would also point out that I think the language leaves it open to interpretation. The actual intent was to raise the price $1 per package per year for 5 years to get us to the point where we break even on the program. So I don't know if I need to offer an amendment to clarify that language. So I would offer an amendment to make it clear that the price per package, each size, will go up $1 per year for the next 5 years.
Second.
Is there discussion on the amendment? And so really, we're just changing that from 4 years to 5 years.
Correct.
All in favor of the amendment?
I will move the resolution as amended.
Second.
And Councilor Thomas, what you're saying is, like, I use Gregory's for my pickup, and they come and take my trash. This, at the end of the 5 years, will make it so that people who choose to use the city are paying 100% of their trash pickup through this, and then they can compare apples to apples. Is that a good summary?
Yes, it really removes, the program will no longer be funded by taxes, it will be funded by a fee for service.
Yeah.
Any comments or questions from the council? Any further discussion?
Yep. As a member of the Solid Waste Committee, along with Eric, this is not a popular decision by any means. I know how a lot of people feel. I've taken some emails, some phone calls today. Not a lot, but I've taken enough. And a lot of people, as Eric explained, really needs a real full explanation about what's going on here with solid waste. Solid waste budget is one of the top tier costs for a municipal budget. It's right in the top tier where it's becoming unmanageable to some extent. By the time you pay for personnel, the equipment going down the road, the fees that we pay for tonnage when it goes to the landfill, these are all costs that we try to recoup with this program, with purple trash bag fees. Right now, the solid waste budget is in a deficit of around $132,000 that we are trying to make up by incremental increases over 5 years instead of all at once. We felt like that would be the best approach to ease the pain as much as possible to those that are still on the city program. There's a lot of municipalities in the state that are getting out of the solid waste business. The town of Fairfield is one of them. Everything is pretty much privatized in Fairfield with a lot of competition. Gregory CMP, there's a lot of different competition going on there, and prices, from what I've got information from the town council of Fairfield, is that the competitiveness has not only helped the consumer, but it's also helped the city recoup a lot of costs and lower the mill rate by having got out of the trash business altogether. So the broad long-term solution that we are facing down the road is how long can we sustain a service of picking up solid waste in the city of Waterville to the tune of tax increases that we are incurring every single year. What's the way to ebb the flow of the pain is to probably eventually put this to a referendum to some sort for the city to decide if they want to stay in business or get out of the business to make an impact on taxes. That's what the long term, I would think, that we're all faced with. Not only Waterville, but a lot of municipalities. So this is a very, I will admit that I was one of the councilors in the beginning, along with the mayor, that were against purple trash bags from the very beginning. But once I was able to get into the real deep waters of what this is and what it entailed, and saw the infrastructure of what it was trying to do, there really was not a reasonable, comparable program that could address the situation at that time, and this is what we have, although not perfect, believe me. It's not perfect because we still have a lot of complaints about the quality of these bags, and they still are an issue. A lot of people wouldn't mind having a purple trash bag as long as it was able to hold up. So that is still an issue, and obviously, administration, Mike, we should be looking at that and still addressing those complaints, because that is one of the prime complaints about these purple trash bags, is the actual quality versus being a see-through, and as soon as you go to as soon as you go to the noose to tighten it up, it falls apart. So those are some of the things that I can say from history and from the past, and actually being up at the pulpit and telling Eric as a counselor how bad these were at the very beginning, along with
Didn't you
several
run
others.
against him on that?
Yeah. You know, I can honestly say that this is probably the only comparable program that at the time, as we get into it, as I investigated it, makes sense at this time. But obviously, we have to have the broader discussion down the road as to what I said earlier. So I kind of recommend this as from the committee as recommending for this to happen.
Mark, are we still, just for the record, receiving, are we paying for in any way or subsidizing in any way the recycling program?
There is a cost associated with recycling that is also covered in these solid waste costs as part of the budget.
Would it be cheaper to not have the recycling program?
As it is now, the way we're set up, I don't think it would be cheaper because we'd be paying that tonnage on.
Because that would just go to the trash, which would increase the cost of people's trash disposal.
And it's more expensive to dump trash, even now. It's still more expensive to dump trash than it is to dump recycling. And I put that in quotation because a lot of recycling actually is trash at this point, let's be honest.
Right, no, it's just the markets. It just gets trashed.
But we pay less per ton by sending it to a recycling facility than we do by sending it to a landfill directly.
So one of the questions that was raised was, have we ever looked at having a private entity actually taking care of that trash disposal for the city? Is that something that we have done, some kind of analysis to see if it would be cost effective for us to do that?
I think we've bid it out 3 separate times since I've been here. And it's come down to the same decision every time. More expensive to bid it out. Is that going to hold true throughout time? I don't know, but in the times we've done it.
More expensive on the collective, not necessarily for each individual. Like, I know it's cheaper for me, but I also have 7 people that live in my house. Instead of the purple bags, I have a big brown truck, and I just take whatever I put out there. And at Christmas time, they send me a sheet full of coupons for like one big item, one of these, one of those.
You're right, more expensive on the collection.
Right.
And it depends on the individual. You know, if you're one person like myself, I mean, I put out 1 trash bag every 2 weeks probably. So for me to pay a private service, it wouldn't make sense. So there are a lot of people for whom the city service still will make financial sense, and each family will be able to make that decision based on the real cost of getting rid of your trash, you know. And I just want to be clear, because so what you're paying for when you buy that purple bag is for the city to get rid of the trash in the bag. I mean, the bag itself is a small fraction of what you're paying for. What you're paying for is to get rid of that trash. That's what that costs, what that covers.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand the purpose of the, you know, and the fairness of the bags. I mean, we had plenty of discussion about, you know, the one family individual versus 7, you know. It makes it fair for the person who's by himself to be able to use just a single bag instead of having a flat fee being assessed to everybody, because then the person with 7 kids in the house will pay the same amount as the person with 1 kid in the house, or he will live by himself. Myself, I put out about a bag every 2-3 weeks, so I don't have a problem paying it, you know. But yeah, I understand that point. I was just checking, asking as far as, you know, if there's an option. Other than that, I know we talked about also like the stickers possibly on bags. I think it's something that was raised, and there was some concerns about not being feasible because sometimes of weather or something like that.
People would say they put a sticker on that bag and we have no way, it's not there. Well, I put one on there, you guys gotta take it. They don't have no way of proving otherwise.
Not all there, you don't
They
take
play
it.
the games.
I would definitely understand, yeah, okay.
Is there any more discussion from the council on this topic? All right, I will open it up for public commentary or questions.
my name is Heather Merrill. I live in Ward 6, and this is not my trash bag. It's one that my coworker brought to me. And I get it. You can call the company, and they'll send you more. But what do I do with these? It's the whole roll. As you can see, they've taped it here. They've been making these bags long enough. And what am I supposed to do? Go buy more purple bags to put these in to throw them away. And I get it that it's the trash inside, and that's what we're paying for. But this bag is all ripped, and if it's ripped, they're not gonna take it either. This is nothing against our public works crew. This is the people that make these bags. I've got a whole row here,
It's a weird
and they're all
shape.
the same. If anybody wants to see them, they can check them out. But I'm sure you've all heard from your constituents that it's the exact same thing. And like I said, you can call, they'll send you more, but what do? You gotta go get more trash bags. And I personally don't want another trash truck coming down my street. Our roads are horrible as it is, and there's no money in the budget to fix them. So that's one more dumpster people coming down the street. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Mark, would there be any way to do like a local exchange? I mean, it does seem inconvenient if you get a package of bags that are no good for one reason or another. I mean, is there no way for us to have like a reserve at Public Works or somewhere where they can come in and exchange bags that they can demonstrate aren't, or even with the truck? I mean, maybe this isn't the place to have that discussion, but I think it's something that we should look into with the Solid Waste Committee, whether there's a way to deal with the inconvenience of having to actually call the company and send it back to them rather than just being able to exchange them, you know, right at Public Works or someplace locally.
I can look into that. The company will need to be contacted. They want to know about defects. There's a lot number on the bag. They want to know what that lot number is so they can investigate their production process to see where the defect occurred.
Right, but we could take responsibility for that ourselves and possibly,
A lot of time in the office for that, but
but also possibly be aware of larger issues, right? I mean, if we see a trend that we're getting a bunch of bags all at the same time that have a problem.
I'll tell you, the people who would know best is my trash crew. If they were experiencing a lot of defective bags, they'd certainly let me know. And they're not. And they're grabbing them by the neck and throwing them. And I follow the truck, and there's never been an issue with a bag breaking, never.
I think the concern, though, is the bags that are so defective you can't actually put them out.
Right.
So I think the question is if there would be a mechanism so that people could exchange those bags and have the city take on the responsibility of contacting the company.
Hi, Dan Libby, Ward 4. Councilor Thomas, you said something that was very interesting to me. You said that we have the ability to make a choice for ourselves when it comes to plastic bags. Is that what you just said up here? We have the capacity to make a decision on that ourselves?
I said you have the capacity to make a choice of whether or not a private trash service makes more sense than the city service, is what I said.
So I can choose whether or not I want to buy the bag or not, is what you're saying. But how is this different than the plastic bag ordinance that was placed against us as citizens in this town? I had that choice that I was no longer allowed to make. How come I have a choice here?
I think
it's very similar because in this respect, why was the town allowed to vote on this issue when it was a plastic bag ordinance? When it comes to money, however, we're able to try to push it through the council. Isn't this something that we should vote on and let Colby decide?
This was voted on.
Well, I'd like to propose that we do something different than this because it seems like we have a disagreement. Thank you. Thank you.
Kathy Weeks, Ward 1. I guess I'll direct my question to Councillor Mayu, where you have the history. If I remember correctly, when the purple bags were established, we as taxpayers were already paying for trash collection. Is that not correct?
We were paying, yep.
So then the purple bags came in, and that was an additional tax that the taxpayers had to pay, at least $120 more for the year.
At that time, yes, but there was a change in the formula for solid waste disposal at the same time. We were dealing with incinerators at Orrington. We were traveling, our trucks and our crew were going much further. There's all kinds of things that were shifting around with municipalities as far as solid waste disposal in general. This is why we were forced to go back to the table, and like Eric did, with the Solid Waste Committee, we did some, in conjunction with our Public Works Department, and we had to come up with some kind of program to offset the costs for solid waste removal. So these are all things that we're starting.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Which I understand, and if you've been reading about recycling is a dying element in our society right now. But when you just said a few moments ago that maybe we should be looking at the Public Works getting out and saving us money, because tax-paying residents in this town cannot endure more taxes for whatever.
And I think that's kind of what I said, we'd have to have that serious discussion with our residents, possibly down the road, a broader discussion of bringing this to the citizens of Waterville, that do we want to continue to pay for this very expensive service?
Exactly.
Versus...
But it needs to be today, not a year or 2 years down the road when the residents are now going to encounter another fee for these bags.
I just want to say, once again, you are not required to buy these bags. You can go to a private hauler. You don't have to buy these bags. That's the whole deal. And when we first put this in place, the idea was to no longer pay for trash removal with tax money. It was to pay for trash removal with the fees you pay for these bags.
No, I understand that, and I'm talking to Councilor Mayu about that.
There is an important, and not to relive, 5 years ago, but to answer your question that hasn't really been answered, when you say we used to pay for it in our taxes.
Exactly.
It's correct, but the budget was going up so much.
We would have had
they ran out of money.
We would have had an additional half a mil tax increase at the time had we not instituted this program.
Right.
I am fully aware of that.
No,
So maybe it's time now, instead of waiting, to have the analysis done about getting rid of the business.
But
That's my only comment to Councilor Mayu.
I understand, but to your point, that's essentially what we're doing. I mean, we're making this so that the bags pay for the program. It's not being paid for with tax dollars anymore, and eliminating it wouldn't change the city's bottom line.
Mark, so to Councilor Thomas's point, we're saying that within 5 years, and I think to Mrs. Weeks' point, we should be talking this year, is that we just increase the cost of the bag, so it just covers the program, and if people want to pay for that, does that include the cost of salaries and benefits of the people that pick it up? Because that changes every year. Every year that cost goes up, which means the price of these bags should go up every year on a continued basis in order to truly pull it out of the taxpayer's dime. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes.
So that's an interesting conversation we should have too. It should be continued to go up in the future.
Correct.
Well, and we'll have to, honestly, as the price goes up, more people are going to opt out. And so we don't know exactly what that'll do to the cost of the program and the revenues coming in, what the bottom line will look like. I think we'll definitely have to reevaluate, probably on a yearly basis. We'll have to look at what happened when the price went up and reevaluate where it's headed and whether we need to adjust.
So I have a question. So I know people want to get rid of the program. And so if we get rid of the program, what do we do with our trash?
There's only so many options.
Do we go, because if we go to a private person, then we're going to charge the same fee to everybody, whether you have 7 children or 1?
They get to pick. They get to pick.
You get to pick?
It would be individual.
It would.
If
Would that be cheaper than the purple bags?
Depends on how many.
For some, it would. I personally, I understand. I am very much for, constituents, not all continue being asked to put money forward in the form of taxes. I'm very much for that. I am. Yeah, if I could have tax never increase for a certain period of time, I would like that very much. But just thinking about the program and the way that it works, for some people it would not be. It wouldn't be the best option for them. But again, like the Councilor Thomas said, you don't have to get the bags. If you don't get that, maybe the other option is cheaper for you. And I'm just looking at terms like, if we stop this program, then what do we do? What is the option beside the bags that will make it better for the people? If there's an option there, then maybe we should look at it. But right now, it doesn't sound like there's one that is better than the program.
But should I subsidize my neighbor's trash pickup since I'm already paying for my own?
No.
Sure,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So Kathy, I agree with you of having a more serious discussion about potentially lowering our taxes by getting out of the program. This program, as designed, as we're doing now, like Eric Thompson of the Solid Waste Committee has said, is to eventually ease people off the program or stay on the program according to what their way of living is to them right now, as far as when it comes to solid waste disposal. There's a lot of single people out there that can afford the purple trash bags, and then there's families that find it very cumbersome to afford this because of the prices going up per bag, and it may be in their best interest to seek a private hauler because the competitive market out there for private haulers is very real. You can get good deals by going with private haulers. I've stood on the doorsteps of many of my constituents, and we discussed fees and some of the competitiveness of the private haulers. And they've, told me in detail of what they are able to throw away and how much they can throw away with very minimal damage to their personal budgets. Very much in the framework of what they can afford, and found it to be, pleasant to them as far as a monthly payment plan. But the thing about it is that this is, again, one of our top tier burdensome things that the municipality is dealing with. We're not alone, where everybody is, small towns, medium-sized towns, large cities. This is something that is a constant pain in the neck for our budget and for us to discuss because it's real. The formulas for paying per tonnage to get rid of the trash, to transport it, to make contracts with landfills. It's all the ever ongoing formula of being very taxing to the budget. And yes, I agree that we have to at some point allow the city to this is a bigger decision than the council, in my opinion, to make. And we need to allow the city to make that ultimate decision, whether it be this year, next year, or the year after. But again, I think right now as a council, we reevaluate it on a year-to-year basis and see where we're going with it. We're kind of in the stages of just really taking review of it, unless we come to the point where, say, this is just not sustainable anymore without the continuance of raising taxes. I believe the tax mill rate can come down at a pretty good rate, like the town of Fairfields did when they got out of the trash business. And I think that is very rational, reasonable thought to have. And I think that can happen. So those are my comments to you in regards to that. And I respect your opinion about that.
Thank you.
Just briefly, I don't have a stake
Your name
in this
for the
game.
record?
Mark Andre. I'm an Oakland resident, but what I wanted to speak to you about, he can't do it now, is Jabron Carter. Back about 4 years ago when this was coming out, I helped Jabron Carter with a lot of volunteer cleanups around Waterville, cleaning up areas where garbage was piling up, different things. And one of the reasons you have municipal waste disposal is it's recognized that some people can't afford to get rid of their garbage, and there's a collective interest in getting rid of it. And I'm just wondering if the board considered, in this interim, as you make the garbage more expensive to get rid of, how you're going to account for the fact that garbage might begin to pile up around the city that isn't being removed. In other words, you may wind up with a much dirtier city in the interim if you start to up the fee for people that can't afford it. When you first came out with the bags, there were people in Oakland that had to start locking their dumpsters because garbage started to come our way. But just a point.
I understand your point, and conversely, I mean, this is sort of the well-kept secret. We were having a problem when we were just letting people put anything out on the curb. There were people from Fairfield, people from Sydney, people from any place where they had to pay to get rid of trash. They were bringing it to Waterville, and taxpayers in Waterville were paying for it. And so people ask, where did the trash go? Because some trash disappeared. Well, some of it was trash that was coming in from out of town that, you know, if you have a brother who lived in Waterville and you lived in Sydney, you know, perhaps you were sticking it out on the curb in Waterville. And then as far as illegal dumping goes, I think really what we've witnessed, and I've been involved in a lot of cleanups. I mean, a lot of what you see dumped illegally is mostly bulky items, even with pay-as-you-throw in place. And those bulky items were being tossed out. We don't pick those up as it is. We never have, never will. You know, things like mattresses, sofas, TVs, those are the things that you find really that get illegally dumped, and it was a problem long before pay-as-you-throw was instituted. And it'll probably persist as a problem even after we get out of the trash business, so.
Hi.
Hi, Sandy Sullivan, Ward 5. I'm a little confused. Are you telling me that my tax dollars are not paying for trash pickup at all?
Currently, some of your tax dollars are paying for trash pickup.
About $132,000 worth.
But once...
It comes out of just my pocket.
No, I mean, collectively.
No,
Yeah.
my point is, I'm a Waterville resident. My address is Waterville. However, the trash truck turns before my house. And so I don't have a choice. I'm paying for trash through the city, and I'm paying a private hauler to pick up my trash. I am paying for plowing, snow plowing through the city. I am paying for snow plowing through a private, so I'm paying for a lot of services here through the city of Waterville that I'm not getting. And you make it sound like I'm not paying for it, but I am.
No, actually, I'm saying the opposite. You're paying.
You're saying.
You're paying for your neighbor's trash. Yes, you are.
Well, and I'm paying for my own too. And so I really would like to only pay for one.
And that actually is what we did. The purpose of increasing the bag fees is so you no longer have to pay for your neighbor's trash.
5 years from now.
Right.
You are correct, Sandy.
But for the next 5 years, I'm going to still have to pay my taxes for trash pickup that isn't being picked up. Thanks.
Yeah.
She lives in a very weird neighborhood.
Yeah. These are all valid points.
I'm Charles Poulin, I live down the south end, and I think you keep on putting the price higher on the bags, and the people down the south end ain't gonna afford that. And if you go down the ball field, on the left-hand side, it's full of trash, and it's a dumping zone, and nobody seems to pick it up. They go right by it, and they'll stay there for months at a time, or, you know what I mean? And I think you better either put cameras down there or have the cops go down there and check it instead of staying in the police station. Because you go down there and you overlook at it, full of trash on the left-hand side of the ball field. And when I walk down there all the time and I see it. And matter of fact, I took some of the people that walk, I said, I want to show you something. But I don't think nobody cares. That's it.
Thank you for bringing that up. Is there anybody else? Okay, I'll move it for a vote. All in favor? Unanimous. Next is Ordinance 93, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
An ordinance providing for amendment to the zoning ordinance. Oh, wait. Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Mike, would you just give a summary of what this is?
93?
I did
Yes.
say 93.
I read 94 because 94 is,
You added the word zoning ordinance.
You added ordinance.
Yeah, you added the word ordinance.
well, because 94 is supposed to go in front of 93.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Can we just take this out of order then and go to ordinance 94
Thank you.
first?
Yeah.
Move to so you already read it.
I read
We-
94.
All right, we're good. Bill's not here.
And in summary, this ordinance revises the definition of professional office in the zoning ordinance to facilitate the expansion of Golden Pond Wealth Management at 129 Silver Street. And Mike, could you just give us the brief background
Ann's going to
Oh.
help me do that.
Great.
Thank you, Ann. Because she's, of course, been at the planning board meetings.
Right.
Right. So Golden Pond has been in their current location for approximately 16 years. They're a professional office in many respects, but just not in accordance the way our zoning ordinance exists at this point.
Not by definition.
So if you were to revise this ordinance, the definition of professional office would much better reflect what they do.
And that's previously it was an accounting firm. Is that correct?
Yes.
And now it's an investment firm, and this is just a matter of making sure that it's inclusive to include who's already there and has been there doing business for years.
Correct.
Could you explain exactly what the change is?
Do you have that in front of you? Yeah, I think Sarah.
Ah, okay. My apologies.
Okay.
Right, this sheet, which should have been with your agenda, but we did pass it out.
Okay.
So it looks like this.
It has a sticky on it that says ordinance 94 up on the top right.
So right now, the definition of professional office explicitly excludes financial services.
Oh.
Do you think that was meant to exclude, when they say financial service, was that meant to refer to banks? I mean, how is financial service defined?
That's down below. If you look farther down on the page.
Including it does include banking, credit agencies, security. Insurance, real estate.
So it did cover what this company does.
The definition of financial service covers what they do, but professional office, the definition of professional office explicitly excludes financial services. I have no idea why the ordinance was written this way initially, but.
I assume they didn't want
So
to
these-
bank
these-
there.
I mean, it's sort of trying to read into what the intent was at the time that the ordinance was written, but it could be that the intent was not to have a bank.
I think probably that's right.
I assume we're not going to be shutting down business that has been there doing.
No, I would.
Okay, so this is simply redefining professional office to ensure for the purpose of including the business that is there.
Correct.
Okay. Is there any?
We received a letter from the residents of Wilson Park, and their take was that the planning board was not actually, interestingly, making a recommendation to the council, but just sending back to us to make the decision. What was your take? I was not at the planning board meeting. Were they actually making a recommendation, or were they just passing the buck to us?
Well, I think it was the general consensus that this part, this change of the definition was fine. I think the planning board was in favor of that. The chairman made a comment that made it sound as though the planning board was just passing this off to the council. I'm not sure that he really meant that. We have a planning board member here.
His intent probably was just that we actually have the final say.
I think that's what he meant was.
We will allow
really
members of the
matter.
public to comment on this, I promise you guys. Yeah.
Because the council has the final say.
Either way, it's here.
Any other questions or comments from the council before we ask? All right, questions or commentary from the public, and we just ask that you come up to the podium and state your name and tell us who you are.
Good evening, Brian Bernacci. After sitting here for a couple of hours, I think we're going to change what we do in the future. We're going to become a burrito shop and a low-cost trash hauler. So if we could ask you to include those two definitions as well. Just kidding, just kidding. I'm the senior partner at Golden Pond. I'm here along with my partner, Bert Langette, and a few staff members. And I want to give you a little history of what's happened at Golden Pond at 129 Silver Street since it became a transitional zone. As Nick mentioned, it was an accounting firm previously, and for about 60 years before that, it was known as Dr. Pomelo's house, or the house with the big brass P on it. The accounting, you remember that? Everybody that's been here for a while knows it as the house with the big brass P on it. Yep. So they approached the city about moving their accounting firm there. They met with opposition from the neighbors on Wilson Park. There was quite a battle that ensued. There was compromise reached, and there were a number of accommodations made. Probably most importantly, there was a lot that's adjacent to the Golden Pond property that was given to what is now the Pelletier property. Used to be known as the Alphon House. And that lot can never be built upon, cannot be developed. There was a 6-foot-high buffer strip put in front of that lot, and having been there for 16 years, I've seen that lot used for lots of recreational activities. They also gave up access to Wilson Park using their vehicles. So the only access point that we currently have is through Silver Street. And that worked for them, and they just got too big. They serve and continue to serve hundreds and hundreds more clients than we do. They had a lot more traffic than we have on a daily basis, and they built that big, beautiful building up at First Park back around 2003. And that's about the time that we decided that we needed to move from the little small town of Belgrade to the big city of Waterville. And we did so primarily to be more convenient for our clients. We service a clientele that is, average age is over 70 and lives within a 15 to 20 mile radius around Waterville primarily. It was a good location for us. We have been there for 16 years, and there's a couple of other reasons that we decided to move there. It's convenient. Being over age 70, they sometimes have a hard time getting around. So it's an easy drive in, easy drive out, and our clients really appreciated the move. The community also welcomed us in large part, and I think initially the neighbors did as well. We were a quiet company. We're there for 8 to 5 every day, and then we disappear. We're never there on the weekends. If we are restricted from expanding, my wife and I, who's commonly known as the landlord, we still own the building. And to my neighbors, I would just say that what's likely to go in there is a service firm, which probably has more traffic. You'll see more vehicles and more disruption to your daily day than what we currently offer. We have a problem. It's a good problem to have. We've grown. When we first moved to town, we had about 100 clients and 4 staff. We've grown to the point where we now serve over 500 clients, and we have a staff of 8. The other reason that we moved to the community is so that we could be more involved. Bert and I have served on a lot of boards. Our staff also has served on a lot of boards, from Thomas College to the Maine Children's Home to the Alphon Youth Center. And we've also been strong supporters of many of those charities and nonprofits. in the last 16 years through sponsorships, capital campaigns, annual appeals. Golden Pond and its partners have donated nearly $1 million to these organizations. So I say this just to say that we're asking you to invest in our growth. We have explored every other option. We explored moving into the Hathaway building. The cost was just not there for us, and it was inconvenient for clients. We've explored every single vacant building downtown. We even looked at a project back before the center was being redeveloped to move into the top floor of the center. I was excited about that until I got a chance to walk through and get into the guts of the center and decided against that. We've looked at every other building downtown. As I mentioned before, our problem is we need ease of access, and we like a quiet space. And the ease of access, the problem we have downtown with clients that are generally over the age of 70 is parking to some extent, but really just access, and there's really not a lot down here where there's elevator access. You won't find a lot of accounting firms downtown. You won't find wealth management firms. So it's been suggested that, the place for us is downtown. We've explored that. What we're asking is for you to find a way to invest in our growth so that we can stay where we are for the next few decades. As I drive into town every day, from KMD down Silver Street on the left, I see predominantly service businesses, and I see a couple of apartment buildings. I don't see a lot of residences. We happen to neighbor Wilson Park, but our only access and the way we face is Silver Street. None of the properties on Wilson Park directly abut us. So in our view, we're really not part of Wilson Park in reality. Now, maybe in some zoning laws we are. Maybe that was the case way back when, but we're a Silver Street business. So as we look to the future, I would just ask you to measure us by what we've done in the past. I would predict that everyone you're going to hear from that's in opposition to this tonight, 5 months after we're done, if you ask them a month after that, there's going to be no disruption. We are going to plant that same 6 to 8 foot barrier. We're going to use the same kind of landscaping that we currently do, and we get complimented even by our neighbors that are opposing us on this. So in summary, I'm asking for balance, I'm asking for some flexibility, and I'm asking you just to give us a leap of faith that we're going to do the right thing here. And no, we're not going to add the burrito shop, but maybe down the line.
Mike, come use your microwave.
So, Ann, by changing the definition of professional service and removing financial service, does that now mean that in the future, any of those properties in the transitional zone could, for instance, be a bank?
Yeah, okay, hang on a minute. Banking is, it doesn't specifically say a bank, but it does say.
So, but what I'm saying is any of those properties in the transitional zone could now, they're now restricted from being a financial service, but with this change, they could be a service including banking, credit agencies, security and commodity brokers, insurance, real estate, and offices. A lot of which we already have on Silver Street.
Well, could we make it so that we're just excluding like banks? So, I mean, because I think that the idea of that was really just to keep the nature of the building, not to...
I just want to be clear on what will be allowed in that entire transitional zone if we change this language.
Yeah, but don't we have a new credit union essentially going up adjacent?
It's in a different zone.
Really?
Yes.
So the planning
It's another
board
spot zone.
did look at this with the word banking stricken because of this possibility of confusion, but I'll let, Brian is the one who said that, can you define banking?
Yeah, like any business, our business has changed so much. What is banking? Now, for most of you, when you hear what is banking, your answer is a big brick building with a drive-through that takes up a lot of space. With online banking, any investment firm can do banking, so banking is really not the term that should be used. I'd love to tell you I know which term should be used, and I'd bet pretty serious money that what they were trying to avoid when they put that financial services restriction was high traffic, high volume banks and credit unions with drive-throughs and lots of traffic. But the term banking is open to lots of interpretation. We could offer banking services where we are currently. That would not change our traffic pattern. That would just mean that we're offering another service to our existing clientele.
And just to be clear, the transition zone, if you're coming from Giffords towards downtown, it's basically the left-hand side of Silver Street from where Silver Street begins to right to his property, correct? And then there's a small part of the transitional zone further on down Silver Street that sort of stands on its own.
Where we have like Apollo and whatnot.
Maybe. Are there any other transitional zones in the city besides that?
Only on Silver Street, yeah.
We're not going to shut his business down. He's been there. I mean, it's just...
No, I just want to be clear about where this affects and what the change means, and whether or not we want to, if the intent, for example, originally was to not have a bank or a credit union on that stretch of road, do we want to do something to prevent that from happening? I live directly across the street. You do have a beautiful property. You're my quietest neighbor.
Thank you. Thank you.
I also actually happen to have concerns about Silver Street. It's slowly, half of it is residential. My side of the street is principally all residential. And it's slowly becoming more and more of just a commercial zone and losing what was originally a residential neighborhood. And I'm not making a judgment about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think that the city needs to make, we're looking to have this discussion in the future about the city's zoning, and we need to decide, are we just going to go full-on commercial on Silver Street? Are we going to try to have some sort of a mix, or are we going to do something at some point to protect the residences on that road? It's sometimes I have to wait 5 minutes to back out of my driveway. I can't cross the street to walk my dog because it's so much traffic coming down the road, and there's no sidewalk on my side of the road, which is something I have a concern about. So that's why I ask these questions. It's bigger picture than just allowing whether or not this business is going to be allowed to stay where it is, expand. There's also, the only real concern I would have is, your business is quiet, but who says what happens 5, 10, 15 years from now? You sell the property to somebody else, and what have we opened it up to by making these changes? And what could that's the real concern. What happens in the future, not with you particularly, but whoever might be the next owner?
Could we do something similar than what we did at Heather Falls and designate an area?
Well, I think just for the sake of tonight, we need to deal with what's in front of us tonight. I think what Eric is doing is also making sure that we understand that there is a larger conversation that needs to take place after this, because there is a large concern about protecting the residential areas, and frankly, I think it's a very important and good conversation to have, but we're not having that conversation tonight. Tonight we're talking about this particular property. And one thing that is in front of us right now is whether we are going to change the definition to include the business that is already there. That is this specific ordinance, and then we have another one coming up after that will deal with the zoning.
I thought we were
Unless people have questions, I'm going to sit down because I'm sure there's other people coming up behind me.
You got it.
Thank you.
You got it. Thank you. And this is the time where if anybody else from the public wants to come up and discuss the definition of professional office, now would be the time to do so?
Yeah.
Okay.
folks.
Hi.
My name's Chris Coleman, and I am an abutting property owner to Golden Pond. I just want to speak briefly about the definition. I have a lot to say about Ordinance 93, 2019 as well. But there already is a zone for banking and financial services. If you look in the definition section under service industry or service establishment, the definition of that, it's pretty clear why it was excluded from the professional offices. If you look at the further definitions of professional offices, you'll see that it's meant for small, almost home businesses. The sign, everything, they're not allowed to advertise their services on the street. None of that is being proposed to change. And in fact, the proposal that the zoning board has sent to you would not make Golden Pond a legal tenant in that property. So the proposed change isn't even accomplishing what you're hoping to do, and really what we're hoping to do, which is keep Golden Pond Wealth Management there. Nobody here, nobody on Wilson Park has called the code enforcement officer asking them to shut them down. That's not our intent. But you are fiddling with definitions that, are essentially taking banking out of the definition of service establishment. You're taking financial services out of that definition. Service establishments, that's what this area is zoned for. So you're removing it from the zone where it belongs and where the banks and financial institutions are in this city, and you're moving it to another area. I just want to propose to you an alternative, which is grant him a variance. Let him go through the variance process. That's what any other city in America would probably do. There are significant protections for the abutting property owners in that process. And look, we're going to be judged by the same people who sent this up to you today, the same zoning board. But there is a way that you could recognize our rights as abutting property owners, and you could do it in a way that wouldn't be illegal spot zoning. That's my proposal. I think that nobody's asking, like I said, shut down his business, but we don't need to mess with these zoning ordinances. That's something that should be done comprehensively as a city when you think about that, not ad hoc like this. So that's my only comment.
Actually, on that last thing, I appreciate that because Eric has actually been trying to spearhead this effort to, he will be leading an overall comprehensive, because you are correct on that. And actually, I was going to ask, is there a way we can allow this for Golden Pond but not change so that, say, Golden Pond moves, we haven't just completely changed the zone that somebody else could come in and change it. I think that, yes.
Yes. There currently is a contract zone in place which specifies the use of the property. So a compromise would be to eliminate some of the restrictions that are in the contract zone and leave others. So I can give you a copy of what currently is in place if you'd like. And you can see which of these things you might want to leave.
But without changing it, is there a way that we can simply change it for Golden Pond, and if they were to leave or sell the building?
The question is, why did we go down this road, Ann? Why was this chosen as the way to resolve this problem? Whose recommendation was?
I'm sorry.
Whose recommendation was it to actually change the definition of financial services as opposed to granting them a?
They're not eligible for a variance. The rezoning is the only way that you can do it, and it's the Zoning Board of Appeals that grants variances, not the Planning Board. They went to the Planning Board.
Right. So the answer is they haven't applied for a variance, and that's why it's not available to them.
Because the standards for a variance, I don't see how those could be met by them. So in other words, if you say go for a variance, they won't be granted a variance.
I'm an attorney, and I can tell you I do think that they have a very strong argument for a variance. They need to show that it would be undue hardship for them to not be granted the variance. They've been there for 16 years. Of course it would be undue hardship. So, there are viable options there, ways to protect our due process rights that could avoid this illegal spot zoning. That's something that's available to you and to him as a property owner.
So is there a solution that doesn't involve redefining what a financial service is and opening us up to?
No, I would say that you might strike the word banking from that definition, and then we won't have to worry about any confusion. And I think that if Golden Pond does banking in their business, I'm not sure that anyone is going to.
Well, so then where in the zoning would banking fall?
Well, banks are allowed in the commercial A zone.
But does it say banks specifically, or does it say financial services?
Service establishment, which says both banks and financial services. You can find that in, I think it's section 3.12 of the zoning, the ordinances.
Could I just suggest that maybe you define it as a financial services business that's primarily engaged in banking? Right. That would seem to me to be pretty self-explanatory. You're talking about a bank or credit union.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's right that the definition is changing in this world. What is banking? What are financial services? But the onus of the definition in your ordinances today is that, and the judgment by whoever drafted these ordinances is, those are high-volume businesses, right? He's talking about expanding to quite a large tune of his, and that's, you know, we'll talk about that with 93, 2019 there, but, you know, the service industry, those are zoned for downtown because the judgment was made that they do have such high traffic. So I recognize his business. He is an excellent steward of that land. Certainly nobody wants him to move, but we do think that there's a way to do this that's not illegal spot zoning, that would be protective and honor the due process rights that we have. So.
And I just want to say for the record, I understand you're an attorney. You're saying illegal spot zoning. Our attorney's not here to answer that. So I
Specifically ask him that question because of that comment that was made at the planning board meeting. This, actually, the whole strip there is zone transitional. The only difference between Mr. Bernacci's property and the others is that you've placed or the city council that existed.
It's more restrictive, not less.
It's more restrictive, not less restrictive.
So I think you're confusing the contract zone restrictions with the actual definition of financial services, which are excluded from the entire transitional zone, not just his one lot. So that's actually not true.
That is correct. That's why we're discussing the definition.
That's what I'm saying. You're bootstrapping a rezoning through a single parcel for the entire transitional zone, and that's illegal spot zoning, especially because it's to the detriment of the abutting property owners.
and has the city attorney has determined this is not illegal?
It is not spot zoning to have a contract zone in this transitional strip. It has been a contract zone transitional with a base zone of transitional since 1997. But I think the point that he's making is that now the whole strip can have financial services, but in fact, that definition of professional office is citywide, so it's not just the strip that is now allowed to have, would be if you change this.
The transitional zone is the only zone in which professional offices are allowed.
No, that's not correct.
No.
Professional offices are allowed in the residential D zone.
Can I ask a question about, a separate question?
Yes, absolutely.
I was wondering why dental and medical offices were added to the zone, to the definition of professional office?
Because we have a dentist office and there was Waterville Pediatrics there as well?
Yeah, those businesses are already there. So.
Okay. All right.
Yes, absolutely.
There are at least two other financial services firms in the transitional zone. There's Suzanne Ogle-Lanson's Ameriprise Financial, and there's also, it's been a number of different names in one of the other buildings, which is essentially they do something very similar to what we do. So.
Okay. Is there any other questions or comments?
If you strike the word banking, then maybe there'll be less confusion about what exactly we mean by financial service. And I think.
Could we say whose primary? Could we say whose primary business is banking?
I prefer that because that will never be our primary, and I don't think you'd ever see a bank move in.
I think the original drafters solved this problem by making reference to the SIC codes, which you can see they're striking now. And I agree that those should be stricken from the definitions because SIC codes are really no longer the industry standard. but there are other industry-related codes that are very specific. I think NAICS codes are what the SEC is using these days.
It is.
And they apply specifically to different kinds of financial services. They could be targeted, certainly, to accommodate Golden Pond. But I just think that if we were going to change this, and we really just want to facilitate Golden Pond's continued use there, there are better processes to do that don't involve this illegal spot zoning.
Thank you.
Well, I would just say, it sounds like there are a number of properties in this transitional zone that need to be addressed, right, by these changes.
Can we discuss the zoning without discussing the professional office so that we can have that conversation, or does this have?
Well, and this is going to be 2 votes,
Right, well, okay.
so we could move it forward and
And then come back with the NACS codes.
Yep.
If we determine.
That's the recommendation.
So the idea was that we could take a vote on this, and should it pass, we could come back at the second vote in 2 weeks and discuss with specific NACS codes.
just cleaning up the language in general to make sure we're clear.
Which would then give us time to look at all of the buildings in these zones
Right.
and address that. And I want to be clear, this vote, is the council ready for a vote on 94 specifically?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. For ordinance 94, 2019, all in favor? Okay. And is that something that you could help facilitate in the next couple of weeks? And I'm sure myself, Mike, Eric, or really probably anybody here, Sid, would be happy to work with you on whatever way we can help you to narrow that down and come back with a better definition.
I mean, you know, Anna, as somebody who was on the planning board before, you just always have to be very careful about unintended consequences. And just because what's in front of you right now seems absolutely fine, you have to be aware of what this could lead to.
Correct. We will move on to ordinance 93, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
An ordinance providing for amendment to zoning.
Move to adopt.
Second.
From the council, questions or comments and discussion? I'll give you a minute. I see some people looking at this. Go ahead. You can go for a walk. Go on.
So really, all this is changing is it gives them more parking?
Well, as I said, the existing ordinance has more conditions than what is being proposed tonight. If you'd like to have a copy of what the existing ordinance says, I have it right here.
But so what is it actually changing from the existing?
What he's asking for is eliminating all of the conditions of the current contract except for the one that prohibits automobile traffic out onto Wilson Park.
What are the additional restrictions?
The first one is the property shall be used only as a residence or professional office. And what that does is protect the neighbors. Should he decide to go somewhere else, then any of the other uses in the transitional zone would be allowed. Those may be worse or they may be better, I don't know. The second, you don't want to have a copy of this? I can read it to you. The second condition in the contract is a landscape buffer strip shall be installed along the property line abutting Wilson Park to discourage clients of the firm from parking on Wilson Park and to obscure the view of the parking lot from Wilson Park.
Maybe we should just hear the objections from the neighbors first before we go.
You'd like a copy? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please. Thank you.
I didn't realize you had them for everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll give everybody a minute just to look at this for a sec.
Thank you.
And the only, what is it being asked to strike out is what is actually stricken out on this? Is that,
No. What you're looking at, what I handed you was the ordinance from 2001, and the strikeout there and underlining, those were the changes made in 2001, because it initially was zoned transitional with a contract in 1997. So what you have before you tonight on your agenda is ordinance 93, 2019, and that calls for eliminating all of the conditions of the contract except for the one concerning the traffic.
So now it'll be able to be used, it'll be like the rest of the transition zone, except that you can't have a driveway onto Wilson Park.
And there's a little bit more language about the...
Which kind of makes it less of a spot zone.
no, you had talked, Mr. Bonachis, about you will still put in landscaping, but we're taking out the landscaping language. Can you just give me some?
That's not my intent.
Oh, okay.
If you want to put back, if we're going to put up, they're going to drive by and they're going to see the quality buffer strip, the same height with the very best stuff we can put. It's going to look good the way it does now. So I have no problem with that restriction on it and having it carry forward to anybody that might own the future.
Which that would come up during site plan review.
Right.
Well, but the planning board can't necessarily require more landscaping than the ordinance does, because the planning board can just...
But they could require, okay.
So along the street line, it doesn't require a buffer, a screen.
The street line.
It just requires planting of street trees. So, because Wilson Park is a street, as opposed to, there's a buffer behind the Golden Pond building that actually screens it from the lot in behind, which is kind of silly because it's a vacant lot, but...
Walk my dog there every day.
Okay, does the council have any questions or discussions, or do we want to hear from the public so then we can have some concrete stuff to talk about? So members from the public that would like to comment or have a question, we invite you to the podium. Please just tell us who you are and what you have to say.
Hello, my name is Gail Carlson, and I'm the owner of 5 Wilson Park in Waterville, and I believe a longer version of my testimony was shared with you along with the zoning map and photographs of the property. I'm speaking on behalf of the residents of Wilson Park. They're all here tonight, except for Uriah Pelletier, who I talked to before this meeting, and he gave me his blessing to speak on his behalf, and I believe, Mike, he also emailed you a letter. That was just at about 6:30 or 7 p.m. So, the residents of Wilson Park are unanimous in our opposition to lifting the zoning restrictions on the property at 129 Silver Street, which is also significantly a part of Wilson Park. Wilson Park is a quiet, residential, dead-end street with very little traffic. The homes were built in the 1930s. The Alphons raised their children here, and for decades, families with young children have been attracted to this street because of its unique character. We pay a premium in property taxes, and we're willing to do so to live on this street. In fact, we pay as much, and at least one resident pays about 50% more in taxes than Golden Pond Wealth Management. Wilson Park is a medium-density residential zone, as you can see on this map, and I've circled Wilson Park in red. The Golden Pond property was added to the adjacent transition zone. As you can see, it's kind of a brownish color. It's worth noting that the entire opposite side of Silver Street is residential, as is all of Wilson Park, save the Golden Pond property. You can also see from the map and the photos included here that the Golden Pond property is really as much on Wilson Park as it is on Silver Street. So I just draw your attention to the 3 photographs that I've included here. And you can also see from the photographs that even though there are lovely plantings, the area where the expansion will occur is very much visible from Wilson Park. The City of Waterville defines this transitional district on its website as follows. The transitional district is established as a zone in which the principal use of the land is residential, but some specified commercial uses are allowed as special exceptions. Any future commercial development which would detract from the residential character of this street is prohibited. The Golden Pond proposal is an extreme project that does not fit the definition or intent to protect the residential nature of this zone. This property was restricted to prevent the very thing that Mr. Bonacci is proposing. And we've actually been here before. The previous owner, which was Perry Fitz, of this property tried to expand his business, but the residents of Wilson Park fought the expansion and the planning board sided with the homeowners. This I got from Jim Lynch, who used to live in the Alphonse house, which is now Uriah Pelletier's house. The property owner did the right thing and moved to a new location where he now has a thriving business. Why would the city make the opposite decision now compared to then? What has changed? We would argue nothing. Mr. Bonacci bought this property fully understanding these restrictions and knowing the history, knowing what happened with Perry Fitz, that the previous owners were not able to expand. He bought the property anyway, and he likely got a good deal on the price because of these restrictions. If these restrictions are lifted, he gets all the benefit and we pay the price. The quiet residential character of the street will undoubtedly be diminished. Our property values will likely decrease. The enormous proposed addition to his building would be highly visible from our street and create permanent changes to this property that means it will never be able to be a residence again, and it will be left vulnerable to larger businesses that are in need of a huge office when Golden Pond sells. Keeping this property as is, capable of supporting a small allowed business or a residence, is most consistent with the zoning rules to not detract from the residential character of the street. We applaud the work of the City Council to help with downtown Waterville's revitalization. If Mr. Bonacci wants to expand his business and stay in Waterville, he could move to a commercial area, like the downtown, only a few blocks away, which a lot of people are investing a lot of money in right now. It's a win for the city and it's a win for the residential character of our part of town. There are 6 families on Wilson Park. We're all good taxpayers. We also serve on boards and we support our community. We all oppose this proposal and we feel that we are each equal stakeholders to Golden Pond on this issue. We don't feel that we should have to defend why we oppose this, but rather that Mr. Bonacci should have to defend why he should receive a special exception to something that's been already decided by the city. We have said publicly that Mr. Bonacci has been a good neighbor, which is true, but I was a little bit alarmed to hear him say something that just now that wasn't very neighborly, that basically threaten us and say that if they don't get to expand, they're going to leave and potentially a less desirable business will come in. So we oppose Ordinance 93, and we hope that the City Council will follow the precedent and the rules of the city. So thank you very much.
Yes. As a footnote, if you're paying a tax premium, because I did drive over there, we got to get that street moved up. Your street's in terrible condition for the tax premium that you.
My comments were not a threat. It's just a reality. I'm not going to decide what moves in behind me. It's a good property. We like the property. We probably would not sell it. It's in a desirable location. I'd be hard-pressed to think that if we moved out, that it would convert back to a residence for a lot of the reasons that have already been discussed. As to the quiet residential neighborhood, when this is all done, I don't see that changing 1 decibel. When our project is complete, the only significant difference is they're going to see a few rows of bricks above the barrier that we put on the side of the road. It's not going to be an increase in traffic to the point that it will decrease property values. I don't think there's any evidence of that. If that would have occurred, it would have occurred already because it's been commercial for the better part of 25 years. To the point that it's an extreme project, I find that to be somewhat humorous. Our current building is just over 3,000 square feet. We're adding a couple thousand square feet. So it's not extreme. We're not building a tower. We're just adding a 2-story addition that's going to be in the same character and quality of what we have now. And to the city, there'll be no measurable increase in the services to our business from the city. And by my rough calculation, an increase of nearly $100,000 over 10 years in property taxes and equipment taxes. Thank you.
Could I ask a point of clarification? I don't know if it's to you or to the property owner, but why is the request to remove all of the conditions of the contract with the exception of number 2?
That's a question from Mr. Bonacci.
Okay.
Maybe you want to stay up here.
Please sit closer.
So the request is to remove all of the conditions on the contract with the exception of number 2, which is about the vehicular entrance and exit. This includes the landscape buffer, the compact hedge, the trees. Which is the actual measure that is the critical issue for the expansion?
I believe it's the increased ability of parking. I'm not really a proponent of doing away with the landscaping restrictions. Even if they're not there, we're going to do that. As I've thought about this just in the last few minutes and thinking about the plowing, it might have to be something different. I'm more than happy to work with both the city and the neighbors to find the right solution there. But we're also, what we have to do is now go back to the planning board with our project. We had anticipated breaking ground much earlier than this. We're trying to create a box into which we think that we can have a reasonable shot of getting our expansion approved.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And to the same question Eric had in the previous one, was it the planning board that put forward the request to remove all of the restrictions, or was it the property owner?
No, it was the property owner. I'm not sure I'm not sure how familiar he was with the ordinance. Well, maybe he just meant.
Sure.
I would not have, if there's a way to strike the whole buffer thing and take away the landscaping.
Because it's really the park.
We don't want that on there. We're going to do that, whether it's there or not.
I've been over there. It's not a huge lot.
So you can pick and choose among the different conditions that are there.
So do we amend it to say to keep that in? I mean,
Yes.
To amend it, to keep that in.
I'd like to make a motion to at least keep that landscaping stuff in.
Would you like to make an official motion?
I would.
And I would just kind of ask the council, if you're speaking, to please speak into microphones. It is a public meeting and people need to hear.
Before we make a motion, like what could be left in this that wouldn't interfere with what he's proposing?
So part of this is it's difficult to read without having the site plan in front of you, and I think that's the part he needs to have removed. Number 7, I'm sorry, number 8, maybe. Do you have a copy of this?
I don't.
I would recommend we wait to propose changes until the next meeting when we have a site plan in front of us. And perhaps people can actually go over and take a look at the property if they haven't yet.
And I would recommend you do that if you haven't gone over and just driven through the neighborhood, go down Wilson Park, and you can even zip in, I'm sure, and just look at the parking lot.
Can stop and say hello to me.
Yeah. So we're just voting.
Get on the sidewalk. Okay, go.
So we're just voting to move this forward to the next meeting?
Well, yeah, I think what is being suggested by Councilor Thomas is that we take a vote on the ordinance as it is tonight, but once again, like we did previously, there's some work to do before we come back for the second vote 2 weeks from now. Does the council feel comfortable with that?
Yes.
Yes, but I would like to say for myself, I would like to see what other measures could be kept in
Yes.
as we finalize our thoughts on this.
Yes, right. Is there any other questions or comments from the council or the public? All right, is everybody ready for a vote for tonight?
Yes.
Councilor Tate, are you prepared or do you need time?
Yes, no.
You are? Okay. All in favor? Okay. We'll see everybody in 2 weeks. And so, Ann, when again, I would encourage everybody to go look at it. If there's maybe you can, is the site plan emailable at this point?
I can send you his draft
Right.
site plan. I think you need to have the earlier site plan, Rich Perry's site plan, in order to understand that language. Or maybe you want to just eliminate that language that concerns setbacks
Okay.
as it was. And just focus on where you want the buffer now.
Okay. Ann, are we good, or is there anything you need from us? You're good? All right. Thank you. Okay, I guess we're here to counselor updates. Are there any counselor updates?
Go ahead.
There was an email that circulated today regarding Paula and the work that she does for the city. I just wanted to publicly recognize her as well. Paula's been doing a fantastic job, with
Paula Raymond.
Paula Raymond.
She just left.
She did just leave, yeah.
No. So, because I met her today. I was driving down on Saturday and I saw her on the bottom of KMD, in the rain, planting those flowers. And I showed my daughter as we were driving by, like, oh look, she does a fantastic work, and the city looks better for it. So, and that's the kind of things that we should always recognize when we get the chance, and tell people that they're doing a great job, and she's definitely doing that. So.
I just wanted to update people on the property ordinance committee. I just sent out an email today. I've been getting through all this budget stuff, so we're hoping to get together either next week or the week after. I know Councilor Mayhew and Councilor Tate expressed interest in being involved in that. I've also reached out to Chris McMorrow. I think you wanted the zoning one, Phil, but anyway. I reached out to Chris McMorrow, who's a landlord, to make sure we have him involved. And so you'll be hearing, I'm hoping it won't be more than 3 or 4 meetings. It shouldn't be a long one to deal with. I think the zoning thing is going to be a much longer discussion. I'm looking at Ann.
Sounds like it.
But that's where we are with that.
Okay. Any other counselor updates? Next is community notes. Community notes is time where if anybody has something they would like to say or speak about that was not on the agenda tonight, now would be the time to do it. I'm going to kick this off, and I will limit to 3 minutes. If it goes over 15 minutes, I will probably call it to a close, but it doesn't look like there's that many people. I would just like to say that next Monday is Memorial Day. There is a parade at 10 o'clock. At, I believe around 9:30 at least, there'll be a gathering in Castongway Square for a wreath-laying ceremony Typically, I'm one of the only people there, so I would encourage everybody to go to the wreath laying ceremony. It is a very moving thing. And actually, Paula Raymond this year realized that in the past, they've always had plastic flower wreaths, and put forward an effort to, and
Much better.
went down to the VFW, spoke with them, and was actually able to obtain a real flower wreath. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I'd like to let you all go.
No.
Yeah, no,
That's right.
I think everybody deserves to go home. Good evening. My name is Maureen Osbrook. I'm the Reverend Maureen Osbrook. Some people call me Rev Mo. I answer to Maureen. You'd be surprised what I answer to. Let me give you a brief introduction to myself. I'm a suicide awareness trainer, and I've taught history, philosophy, and medical ethics at several colleges, a medical center, and a high school. And I'm now a resident of Waterville. I serve as a minister at the Waterville United Church of Christ. I'm a member of the Waterville Winslow Interfaith Council. And I'm a straight allied member of the Central Maine Pride Planning Committee. And I've been here so long, I forgot why I'm here. But I'm here to thank the community and thank the council for your proclamation and supporting us. And the committee asked me to come here tonight just to cover a couple of points and share a few things with you about who we are and what our values are. The Central Maine Pride Planning Committee believes it should speak for itself and share its values. Central Maine Pride is a program of the Health Equity Alliance. The acronym for that is HEAL, H-E-A-L. HEAL's a nonprofit. It provides services and advocacy to Maine's LGBTQ community, people who live with AIDS and HIV, and also to people who struggle with drug addiction. HEAL envisions a world where all people are valued and celebrated, where HIV, hepatitis C, and AIDS-related deaths are non-existent, and the tragedy of suicide is greatly reduced. Central Maine Pride helps advance the HEAL mission by providing welcoming space for rural and small-town LGBTQ people so that they can live in more tolerant and safe communities. And this is very important. And the reason this is so important is because we know that LGBTQ people are at greater risk in rural areas for isolation, discrimination, and stigma, risks that people who live, their counterparts who live in urban areas don't experience. We know from the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey that 1.5% of high school students in Maine identify as transgender, and 15% identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or say other. Further, this survey indicates 22% of these kids have experienced bullying, even physical assault, at school and elsewhere. Kids 12 to 14 who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender are much more likely to die by suicide than their heterosexual peers. And suicide among much younger children is becoming a national tragedy. This is important to understand. Studies show suicide is not caused because of a child's LGBTQ identity, but rather by how the child's family and community reacts to that identity. LGBT kids and the supporters and families who aren't bullied have higher self-esteem, overall better health, and their risk of suicide is drastically reduced.
Ma'am, you have the time, and I'm not going to tell you to stop. I'm just going to,
Okay,
I'm making you aware.
I'm ramping it up. I have just 1 minute to go.
Absolutely.
Events like the Drag Story Hour that we're planning create a vital opportunity for families and friends to provide that support that these children need. But it does not end there. Events like Drag Story Hour also foster understanding and tolerance among all children, and they decrease bullying and hate in schools and the wider community. And how is that not a good thing? While such an event may not be what every parent wants for their children, and we respect that, the point is there are parents who do. And we ask everyone to be mindful of that. We want to thank all the allies who have joined us in our mission to provide welcoming space for rural and small-town LGBTQ youth and adults. And we want to thank you for providing that space and helping us celebrate diversity and build community. Each of you is making a positive impact on our community and are a blessing to all of us. And now I want to say, on behalf of the committee, thank you, but I want to say as Rev Mo, God bless you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Feel left out. Mark Andre.
Yep. Mark Andre. I'm here tonight before you. I apologize. I was not here 2 weeks ago to speak on the voting issues, but I had another commitment. But I'm here tonight to defend the challengers against the recent attacks that we've had in the newspaper, specifically a piece that was put out by Amy Calder on Thursday. I wish she had remained behind, but she's not here. I guess she only remains behind when students are speaking. But in this case, the criticism we took was for the expense of the challenge ballots that we in voter registrations that we had before the Voter Registration Appeals Board. And what I wanted to address with you is the specific concern that we were looking to address. Following the initial valid challenge over the mailbox addresses, which were shown to be invalid, we noticed when we were reviewing the registrations that we had conflicting indicators of residency. We had individuals that were swearing an oath of residency here who had resided here consistently for, in some cases, for 3 years, but still paid taxes, possessed driver's licenses from other states. Now, if you want to compare that to snowbirds, I think we can agree that someone that goes to Florida and sets up residency there so they don't pay income taxes, they don't have a vehicle impact fee, those individuals should certainly not be voting here in Waterville. But in this case, the students were very similar, the student voters, that they had not gotten these indicators of residency in 2 years. So we put that before the Voter Registration Appeals Board to allow them to make a determination, not on the ballots which were cast, but only on their ability to vote going forward in the city, having not met that residential qualification in 2 years. In these hearings, the ballots were not challenged any longer. They were ruled on by the court, the Supreme Judicial Court, in their final ruling of March 11th. The only thing that was in front of this board was the voters' qualifications going forward, and I want to make that clear. And it's one of the reasons why I think I don't think the students even understand that the ballots that they had already cast were no longer being challenged. What we wanted was we wanted these individuals to understand that when you swear that oath to deny all claims and privileges in anywhere but Waterville, you have an obligation to follow through on that. If you do not do that, you develop two classes of voters in Waterville. You have one group that establishes residency and must live with all the consequences of the election and vote they cast, and then you have other individuals who are able to vote but don't have to live with those consequences, and that's inherently unfair.
Final lap. Excuse me, sir, you're breaking the order of the meeting.
And I will answer that.
Mark, you go ahead. Keep going, Mark.
Anytime you want to draw Oakland out of this district, you go right ahead.
All right, Mark.
But
Mark,
I run for office in this city. But, yeah.
Mark, bring it back here, please, and so you can wrap it up.
Now, if you want to turn to page 2 of the first packet I handed you, this is the voting residency fact sheet. You'll notice the highlighted section. If you are a student, you have the right to register to vote in the municipality in Maine where you attend school, and in big bold letters, provided you have established a voting residence there, as defined in Maine's election law. Now, if you flip to page 4 of this, this is a voting guide put out by Lillian Herman, who was the head of the Democratic Party for Colby College and Waterville. And you'll notice the highlighted portion where this statement from the residency fact sheet has been changed to eliminate the residential requirement. That was also repeated on May 2nd by David Green in these chambers at a community event when he was asked about voting issues in the city. So this is being promoted by the Colby administration, that it is an unconditional right to vote when it is conditioned on establishing residency. The importance of that...
Mark, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up now.
Okay. The importance of that is if you do not ultimately enforce that residential requirement, you have an unequal circumstance between voters in the cities. We don't blame the students for this. This is political candidates and administrators not properly instructing the students in the law. And what we want is we want to educate students in the law, because ultimately they're the ones that have to bear the consequences if the law is enforced.
Thank you, Mark.
And
Mark, it's over now.
That's it for voting, but there's 3 more items here that I just need to point out to the council what these are.
Mark.
And it's 1 sentence. These are items that pertain to FOIA email requests, which we were criticized for. It's 3 packets by issue. They highlight some issues where I believe Mike Roy may have crossed a line into making determinations on city policy. I'll hand them to you, and you can make that determination yourself.
Thank you, Mark.
Kathy Weeks, Ward 1. Just to clarify, Mark Andre was a candidate for part of the Waterville district. So he's speaking for Waterville and not an Oakland resident. But I'd like to refer this comment to my Ward 1 counselor and to the mayor. Mr. Morse, as you know, our ward is very concerned about taxes and the increase in taxes. And you have the burden and the caring of our residents, so thank you for doing that. I would like to thank Jay for the budget meeting last week. I encourage all residents to come to these budget meetings, because last week it was very enlightening for me to realize that we could have been, as a city, receiving many more dollars for IT services than we are. And it seemed like there were only 2 counselors that really cared about that during that week. And this is just one item in so many places, that because we are not all caring about taxpayer residents, that the budget keeps increasing. I know the meeting before this, where one of the people that sit at this table, when the fact was brought out that the school board was asking for 5, and it was perceived only 3, and one of the comments was, well, what difference does it make? Well, 3 and 5 make a big difference. And it just seems like there's only a handful of counselors that realize they're working for the residents. And whatever needs to be cut in the budget needs to be cut. It was very discerning to see the city manager more worried about getting out of that meeting for the hockey game that night than realizing many dollars are going out the door because of lack of leadership. So I would like to thank Jay, and actually, Eric, you spoke about the IT concern also. So thank you very much.
2.5 minutes.
Green Finch, Ward 6. I think I'm the last speaker. Hopefully we can end on a positive note here, because we've been here for a very long time. I want to give an update on the 13th annual Senna Bike Swap, which happened on Saturday. We had 54 kids come through. We handed out 46 bikes, about 30 locks, about 50 locks, and about 30 helmets. Wow. And we actually had some kids came with siblings, but the reason why we had 54 kids and only 46 bikes is we ran out of bikes. For the last several years now, the 24-inch bikes have been our largest size. We ran out. So if you missed donating, or you'd like to help out these 3 kids who don't have a bike.
Just 3 kids?
Just 3 kids didn't. Everybody else came with a bike. Everybody else was able to get a bike except.
Chris McMorrow apparently has a bunch of. I had a meeting the other day, Chris McMorrow mentioned he has a bunch of bikes, and he was asking about Senna and the bikes.
Yeah, so Senna04901 is the email at Gmail. Senna04901.
I will buy one of those
Gmail.
bikes.
All right, perfect. I'll hold you to that.
Go ahead.
And so it's not also just about those 3 kids. Our hope is to kind of continue to grow this program. It was very successful in that we even had kids come up during our bike repair where we repair the bikes, and they were bringing their own bikes and saying, I don't know how to fix my bike, but this happened. And there was a little girl who came whose bike had just broken that day, and she walked it down to the repair. And we gave her a new brake handle. We also gave her some new brake pads, taught her kind of what the difference between your left and right brake is and why, having that back brake is so much more important. And this is a program that we saw over and over again at the swap is a lot of kids just don't know how to take care of their bikes. And so we'd really like to expand, kind of grow the program, kind of teach kids how to actually maintain the bikes that we're giving them. And so that's kind of our further plans, kind of looking forward for what we're trying to do. And I would like to finish by thanking our sponsors, KV CAP, the South End Teen Center, the many volunteers who came from Faith Free Church, and we had bike locks donated to us by Dave Halley, and Parks and Rec really stepped up. There was a miscommunication with emails. One of our volunteers was supposed to go to another volunteer's house and pick up steaks. They misread the email and actually showed up at Parks and Rec and said, there was this email chain, there's supposed to be these steaks. And Parks and Rec and Public Works actually, banded together, came all together and managed to get the steaks to this volunteer. And so just really thank you to the city for at the very last minute, just throwing all of that together. And finally, Friends of Quarry Road who came and we're kind of discussing with them how to get, especially the teens in the neighborhood, up to Quarry Road and start kind of engaging more with the outdoors. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. It's very great. Dan, you're the last one.
Sure. I'll have 3 minutes. Hi, I'm Dan Libby, Ward 4. I'm kind of curious. The first speaker who came up here tonight said that this council was thanking this council for who was supporting. This council supported Drag Hour. I'd like to know which councilors here supported that on behalf of the constituents that put you in the place that you're in right now.
I didn't say Drag Hour.
Your group, pardon? The whole pride, which includes Drag Hour. So I want to know who on this council as a constituent supports that.
I think we all did. We all voted in support of.
Then I say shame. I say shame on you, council, because you know what? That is not representative of your constituents. Not in any way, shape, or form. That type of behavior for the children at the ages that they are is irresponsible and it's negligent on our behalf. So, I would tell you that these are the decisions you wanted to be judged on.
Yes.
These are the decisions that will have you removed. Thank you.
Then
I just want to say Wtvl Cc is my counselor, and I support it.
There's a podium there.
All right. Sorry. Is there a motion? Is there?
I'd like the motion to end the meeting.
All right.
My name is Heather Marrow. I am Ward 6, and Winifred Tate is my counselor, and I support it. A man dressed up as a woman, in my opinion, and maybe mine is narrow, is no different than the Easter Bunny, dressed up as a bunny. No different than Santa Claus.
Excuse me.
That's my opinion, and I'm entitled to it. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you, Winifred.
Is there a motion to adjourn here?
Motion to adjourn, please.
We're done.